The person serving water noticed the girl's broken finger with just a glance. He took the ice cream from the boy beside him, ate it in 2 bites, then used the ice cream stick to make a splint for the girl's finger. After pulling off her hair tie, jokingly, he asked for payment for the treatment, but the girl replied that she hadn't asked him to help. He teased her, insisting she pay, and when leaving, reminded her to go to the hospital for a checkup. The girl and her father then went to the hospital, where the doctor was surprised by the quick splinting, saying that without it, she might have lost her finger. The doctor ordered a CT scan, but just before the scan, the girl heard a familiar voice. It was the man who had helped her. As her father tried to thank him, he suddenly started coughing. The man, noticing something unusual, placed his hand on the father's chest to diagnose him. The father pushed him away, insisting it was just a cold. However, his breathing soon worsened. At that moment, a traffic accident sent many injured people to the hospital, leaving the doctors busy. The worried girl tried to find someone to check on her father, but no one paid attention. She raised her voice to get help, but the doctors quickly went back to tending the accident victims. The water server named Park Hoon saw everything. Just as a doctor arrived to help her father, he was called away to assist with the accident victims. Park Hoon followed, sensing something wrong. While in the elevator, her father suddenly collapsed. Park Hoon and the doctor quickly helped him, and while the doctor fetched equipment, Park Hoon placed his hand on the father's chest, instantly visualizing a 3D image of his heart. He realized the man was having a cardiac arrest, but the doctor was only using an oxygen mask. Park Hoon insisted they check his heart. After some hesitation, the doctor complied and found Park Hoon was right, immediately performing cardiovascular resuscitation. With Park Hoon's help, the girl's father regained a heartbeat, but needed urgent surgery. The operating room was prepared, but the surgeon was unavailable due to the traffic accident. The assistant warned that, if they didn't act quickly, the girl's father could die. Tearfully, the girl realized Park Hoon was the only one who could save him. She begged him to perform the surgery, even though doing so could ruin his career, as surgeries had been banned for him in hospitals. Park Hoon, moved by the girl's plea, silently agreed to help. He prepared for the surgery, and when he entered the operating room, everyone was surprised. The surgery began, and to everyone's shock, there was no bleeding when he made the incision. His skill amazed the doctors, though none of them knew that Park Hoon had spent the last 5 years imprisoned in a secret research institute, where he had performed hundreds of surgeries with a 100% success rate. As he reached a crucial step in the operation, the power suddenly went out, frightening everyone around him. However, the lead doctor remained calm, relying on his years of experience to complete the seemingly impossible surgery in the dark. In this challenging environment, he had developed a courageous spirit. He didn't know the girl's name, but he treated her father out of kindness. The operation continued smoothly, but at that moment, Dr. Soo-hyun arrived, suspicious of the mysterious lead doctor. She was doubtful and didn't believe that someone who delivered water could complete such a complex surgery. Dr. Soo-hyun demanded the surgery be stopped immediately. Park Hoon calmly asked her, "If I stop, can you finish it?" But Soo-hyun was not capable of performing such a difficult operation, having never done it before. Even her assistant acknowledged that she wasn't skilled enough and reassured her that although Park Hoon wasn't a doctor, his abilities were exceptional. Reluctantly, Soo-hyun left the operating room and called security, planning to have Park Hoon arrested after the surgery. However, the surgery was successfully completed, and the girl's father was saved. Soo-hyun searched for the water delivery man, but couldn't find him. Just as Park Hoon was about to leave, Soo-hyun caught up to him and slapped him without explanation. Park Hoon didn't argue. He simply said that it didn't matter who he was, as long as he could save the patient. Soo-hyun tried to hit him again, but Park Hoon caught her hand. She then struck him with her other hand. At that moment, the emergency room called, informing them that the girl's father was experiencing post-surgery complications, and his blood pressure had dropped rapidly. The nearby doctors panicked, but Park Hoon had already foreseen this, describing the patient's condition in detail and suggesting a solution. Dr. Han, who had performed the surgery, rushed in, following Park Hoon's advice exactly, which surprised everyone, including Soo-hyun. Despite this, Soo-hyun was still determined to stop Park Hoon. Dr. Han explained that even if Park Hoon had a medical license, he wasn't allowed to perform surgery without proper hospital registration. Fortunately, the patient had no further issues, but Dr. Han warned Park Hoon never to return. Park Hoon, eager to leave, resumed delivering water, but another doctor tried to arrest him. In a remote private clinic, a doctor was performing surgery on a heavily tattooed man. Midway through, the doctor demanded payment. Frustrated by the situation, one of the man's juniors felt angry. The doctor, however, applied pressure to the patient's wound, causing the man to scream in pain, which scared the juniors. Park Hoon intervened and said the surgery would cost $150,000, with each stitch priced at $10,000. The man would need about 10 stitches, totaling around $100,000. When the man hesitated to pay, Park Hoon applied pressure to the wound again until the full payment was made. The surgery concluded successfully. To make more money, Park Hoon had opened his own private clinic. His fame grew after he saved the girl's father at the hospital. One day, a doctor visited Park Hoon's clinic and witnessed his exceptional skills firsthand. The doctor wanted Park Hoon to join his hospital, rivaling Dr. Han, the best doctor there. Initially, Park Hoon wasn't interested, thinking his clinic earned money faster. But when the doctor offered him a significant amount of money, Park Hoon agreed. 2 years earlier, a group of prisoners had been brought to the hospital where Park Hoon was held. During this time, he noticed that one of the prisoners was wearing a red string bracelet, a gift he had given to his girlfriend Jae-hee when they were young. He couldn't believe his eyes. When he pulled back the white cloth covering the prisoner, he discovered it was indeed his girlfriend Jae-hee. Determined to rescue her, Park Hoon decided to take her away from the hospital. Under his care, Jae-hee quickly regained consciousness, and taking advantage of a moment when the guards weren't looking, Park Hoon escaped with her. However, fate was not kind to them. They were soon caught by the Research Institute's bodyguards, and Park Hoon stopped running. One of the men in black opened fire at Jae-hee. Just as she was about to fall into the lake, Park Hoon managed to grab her hand. However, Jae-hee, not wanting to drag Park Hoon into the situation, chose to let go. Park Hoon was then pursued by the police, arrested, and deported back to his home country. After returning, Park Hoon desperately searched for any information about Jae-hee. Finally, he received news from an old acquaintance who led him to a secret basement. On a screen, Park Hoon saw his girlfriend, Jae-hee, whom he had been searching for all this time. The man told Park Hoon that if he wanted to save her, he would need a lot of money. This is why Park Hoon became so focused on earning money. They went to the hospital, where Park Hoon negotiated terms with Dr. Moon. At that moment, Park Hoon thought he saw Jae-hee and quickly chased after her, but the woman vanished around a corner. Frustrated, Park Hoon confronted the private detective he had hired to search for Jae-hee, asking why he had lied. The detective insisted that Park Hoon had mistaken someone else for Jae-hee, claiming they only looked alike. Park Hoon started doubting himself, but after he left, a mysterious man approached the detective, warning him to stop investigating Jae-hee's whereabouts. Later, with Dr. Moon's help, Park Hoon got a job at the hospital. Dr. Moon even gave him some insurance money. Park Hoon then returned to the detective and told him to continue searching for Jae-hee, promising to split the money. The detective was furious, but Park Hoon assured him he would pay the rest once they found Jae-hee. On Park Hoon's first day of work, he encountered Soo Hyun, who immediately kicked him. However, before he could react, an emergency occurred in the hospital. Park Hoon rushed to the scene, where he found a patient in cardiac arrest. Strangely, the nurse on duty was standing by, doing nothing, as the patient had signed a document refusing resuscitation. Park Hoon, unable to watch anyone die in front of him, did everything he could to save the patient, and in the end, he succeeded. While examining the patient, Park Hoon noticed a bracelet on their wrist. He became highly agitated, as it was the same bracelet he had once given to Jae-hee. Confused, he began to wonder about the connection between Jae-hee and this patient. After some investigation, he discovered that the patient was Soo Hyun's mother. Park Hoon stared at the bracelet, realizing something was wrong. He then made a bold decision. He analyzed the patient's condition and mentally simulated the surgery. But no matter how he imagined it, the surgery seemed impossible. This also meant he had lost another lead to Jae-hee's whereabouts. Soo Hyun's mother had abandoned her when she was a child, leaving her with her father, which caused Soo Hyun to harbor deep resentment. When Soo Hyun turned to leave the hospital, her mother weakly grabbed her hand. Soo Hyun, overwhelmed with emotions, confronted her mother, asking why she had abandoned her. But before her mother could respond, she fell into a coma. Desperate, Soo Hyun called her boyfriend, Dr. Han, hoping he would save her mother. However, Dr. Han did not answer because he knew the surgery had a nearly 0% chance of success, and he didn't want to risk his reputation. Soo Hyun, feeling helpless, realized that Park Hoon was the only one who might be able to perform the surgery. Meanwhile, Park Hoon was still running through the surgery in his mind, ready to give up. But just as he was about to stop, Soo Hyun approached him, heartbroken. She mimicked a gesture from another girl, placing a coin in Park Hoon's hand, pleading for his help in saving her mother. After learning about Soo Hyun's strained relationship with her mother, Park Hoon immediately agreed to try. Park Hoon's success rate in surgery was always 100%, and he refused to operate unless he was confident of success. But this time, he decided to take a chance, even if there was only a 0.1% probability of success. He was ready to attempt the surgery, but just before it began, the hospital director, watching from the observation deck, called down, demanding that the surgery be stopped immediately. This left Park Hoon feeling confused, and when he looked at Soo Hyun beside him, he finally realized she was the hospital president's daughter. Ignoring the director's orders, Park Hoon proceeded with the surgery. Soo Hyun was deeply moved by his defiance. Dr. Han, having heard about the surgery, rushed to the hospital, but Soo Hyun was already filled with disappointment in him. The operation lasted 7 exhausting hours, with Park Hoon working meticulously. During the surgery, however, a complication arose. Despite Park Hoon's efforts to provide emergency care, the patient's condition worsened, and it became clear that her life was slipping away. Soo Hyun, unable to accept her mother's death, pushed Park Hoon aside and attempted to revive her mother on her own. Park Hoon, filled with sympathy, watched Soo Hyun, but there was nothing more he could do. Soo Hyun was devastated and heartbroken, still not understanding why her mother had abandoned her. Now, she was gone forever. Park Hoon held her tightly, trying to comfort her. At that moment, Dr. Han arrived and saw Park Hoon holding Soo Hyun, which stirred complicated feelings within him. Later, Dr. Han sought revenge against Park Hoon, and the hospital held a disciplinary meeting the following day. During the meeting, Dr. Han confronted Park Hoon, asking why he had performed the surgery. Park Hoon calmly stated that he did it for money, a response that shocked everyone in the room. However, they didn't know that Park Hoon had only received a single coin from Soo Hyun and was merely trying to help her mother. Not wanting things to escalate further, Park Hoon humbled himself in front of Dr. Han and left. However, Dr. Han wasn't willing to let the matter go. Angered, Park Hoon lashed out, saying Dr. Han was unworthy of being a doctor. Park Hoon accused him of refusing to operate on patients with low chances of survival just to maintain his perfect success rate. "Do you just let them die?" Park Hoon asked, leaving Dr. Han speechless. Soo Hyun also expressed her deep disappointment in Dr. Han. Soo Hyun later went to her mother's resting place, where she met Seung Hee, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Park Hoon's long-lost girlfriend. It turned out that Seung Hee was her mother's personal doctor. Seung Hee handed over her mother's belongings to Soo Hyun and revealed that Soo Hyun's mother had always loved her. The reason she was abandoned as a child was due to Soo Hyun's grandmother wanting her daughter to go with her father to provide a better life. Hearing this, Soo Hyun couldn't contain her emotions, and the rift between mother and daughter was finally healed. Sadly, it was too late, as her loving mother had already passed. Meanwhile, Park Hoon received a call from the detective, who told him he had found his girlfriend's location. Overjoyed, Park Hoon was instructed to bring the money and meet the detective at a specified location. However, Park Hoon was unaware that a man in a black shirt was following him. Just as Park Hoon and the detective were about to meet, a large truck suddenly lost control and crashed into the detective's car. Park Hoon couldn't believe what had just happened. He rushed to help and immediately brought the detective back to his clinic. Dr. Moon arrived after hearing the news, and Park Hoon began emergency surgery on the detective. Despite the clinic's limitations, Park Hoon placed his hand inside the patient's body and closed his eyes, using his sense of touch to guide him. Dr. Moon was in disbelief, shocked by Park Hoon's incredible medical skills, especially under such dire conditions. Thanks to Park Hoon's efforts, the detective survived the critical phase, and an ambulance arrived to transport him to the hospital. However, just as they were preparing to go to the hospital room, they realized the detective had disappeared. Park Hoon questioned the nurse, but she claimed to know nothing. Her expression suspicious, her attitude left Park Hoon confused. At that moment, Park Hoon received a text message from the detective, saying he was going abroad to recover and instructing Park Hoon not to contact him again. Park Hoon quickly made a call, but the person on the other end didn't answer. The man holding the phone was the same man in the black shirt. Once again, Park Hoon had lost the trail of his girlfriend. It felt as though a mysterious force was preventing him from finding her. He recalled seeing her at the hospital before, so he thought that checking the security camera footage could confirm if it was really her. However, accessing the hospital's security cameras wasn't something just anyone could do. When Park Hoon tried, he was immediately thrown out. Knowing Soo Hyun was the hospital president's daughter, Park Hoon asked her for help. She agreed, and they went to the surveillance room together. Soo Hyun managed to get him access to the footage, and after searching for a while, they finally spotted someone resembling his girlfriend. However, the video quality was poor, and it was difficult to make out her face. What they could tell was that the woman in the footage was a doctor at the hospital. Park Hoon then took Soo Hyun to his clinic to show her a photo of his girlfriend, Jae-hee, hoping she could identify her. To his surprise, Soo Hyun was shocked when she saw the photo because the person in it was her mother's personal doctor. Park Hoon questioned Soo Hyun again, and she confirmed it. They rushed back to the hospital, but couldn't find Jae-hee. They decided to ask for her contact information when suddenly a familiar voice called out from behind them. It was the woman they were looking for. Park Hoon, excited, turned to face her, but she claimed not to know him. Desperate, Park Hoon pulled out a bracelet he had given her when they were younger, hoping it would trigger her memory. However, the woman became furious, saying the bracelet was a lucky charm she had given to Soo Hyun's mother. She demanded to know why Park Hoon had it and tried to take it back. In the process, the bracelet broke, and she angrily stormed off. Refusing to give up, Park Hoon chased after her. Meanwhile, Seung-hee, who was treating a patient, grew irritated by Park Hoon's persistent pursuit. She pushed the patient aside, and seeing Park Hoon so heartbroken, Soo Hyun had no choice but to drag him away. They ended up at a barbecue restaurant where Park Hoon, feeling down, turned to alcohol to drown his sorrows. Soo Hyun asked if he knew anything about his girlfriend's parents. She had seen a family photo of 3 people on a website, and when she showed it to Park Hoon, he realized that the man in the photo wasn't his girlfriend's biological father. Now, he wasn't sure if S was really his girlfriend or just someone who looked like her. Seeing Park Hoon so upset, Soo Hyun admired his determination. She reached out and gently touched his face. Dr. Han, observing the scene, called Soo Hyun, but she lied and said she was at home. Park Hoon, drunk and confused, mistook Soo Hyun for Jae-hee and slowly held her hand. To Soo Hyun's surprise, she didn't pull away. Even though she had a boyfriend, Soo Hyun found herself spending time with Park Hoon. This situation wasn't lost on Dr. Han, who wasn't angry because he needed Soo Hyun as the director's daughter for his own plans. Soo Hyun originally called Seung-hee, hoping Park Hoon would apologize for his earlier actions. However, Park Hoon was too drunk, and the two ended up taking him to Seung-hee's mother's house. An unexpected slip caused an awkward moment, leaving Soo Hyun embarrassed and Seung-hee with mixed feelings. Seung-hee commented on how close Soo Hyun and Park Hoon seemed, and Soo Hyun quickly told Seung-hee about Park Hoon's search for his girlfriend. The next day, Dr. Han confronted Park Hoon, warning him to stay away from Soo Hyun. Park Hoon ignored the warning and even teased him, which infuriated Dr. Han. He couldn't tolerate anyone speaking poorly about his girlfriend. Just then, Soo Hyun passed by, witnessing the scene, and Dr. Han had to let it go. The presence of S had made it impossible for Park Hoon to live a normal life. He always believed that the other person was his girlfriend. Dr. Moon quickly tried to comfort him and asked if there was any way to confirm she was Jae-hee, like a scar, birthmark, or something similar. Dr. Moon's words suddenly triggered a memory for Park Hoon. He remembered that his girlfriend had undergone a kidney transplant in the past. To help Park Hoon, Dr. Moon tried to use his connections to access Seung-hee's medical records, but the hospital had strict rules. Accessing someone else's records was illegal and punishable by law. However, Park Hoon didn't care about that. He grabbed the files and took them to his room to check. Dr. Moon rushed to stop him, warning that such actions could cause him to lose his medical license, but Park Hoon didn't listen and pushed Dr. Moon aside. He sat in front of the screen, staring at the results, which showed that both kidneys were intact. Park Hoon sank into the chair, not wanting to accept the truth in front of him, but it was undeniable. From a distance, Park Hoon looked at Seung-hee, who resembled his girlfriend. He couldn't believe that two people could look so alike. Park Hoon began to recall every moment he shared with Jae-hee, and thought to himself that no matter how much someone might change, you can't fake a heartbeat. Without hesitation, he went up to Seung-hee and hugged her. Surprisingly, she didn't resist, perhaps feeling some sympathy for his situation after hearing his story. On the other side, Soo Hyun felt that Park Hoon had gone too far, but Park Hoon insisted that there was only one person in the world who whose heartbeat matched his, that was his destiny. After saying this, he immediately embraced Soo-hyun, which enraged her. She cursed him as a scoundrel and stormed off. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a pregnant woman was experiencing severe bleeding and a lack of oxygen. If not treated quickly, the baby's life would be at risk. The doctor on duty didn't know how to handle the situation, so he called the department head, who was in surgery, for advice. Park Hoon placed his hand on the woman's stomach, and in that moment, he could sense her physical condition. His preliminary diagnosis was a lung laceration, and since an emergency CT scan would delay treatment, he insisted on immediate surgery. Soon, he was the anesthesiologist, and Soo-hyun assisted in the surgery. Under their careful coordination, the surgery went smoothly, much to everyone's surprise. People began to think that Park Hoon's small team could soon surpass Dr. Han's. However, the patient's blood pressure suddenly dropped, and Park Hoon suspected that Soo-hyun had made an error. They began arguing about their medical specialties, but fortunately, it was all in the name of saving the patient. After their tireless efforts, the surgery ended successfully, and the sound of the baby's cry brought relief to everyone. Their excellent performance earned recognition from their peers. Meanwhile, Dr. Moon approached Park Hoon, suggesting that the medical records could have been falsified. To uncover the truth about Seung-hee's identity, he proposed running a new test. Although Seung-hee felt helpless, she couldn't break hospital rules, so she agreed to undergo the new test. Afterward, Dr. Moon obtained a disc with the test results. Opening the disc would reveal Seung-hee's true identity. Seung-hee, on the other hand, was feeling extremely stressed. She made a phone call to the man in black, who had been preventing Park Hoon from discovering the truth about his girlfriend. It appeared they were conspiring together. While she was on the call, Dr. Moon unexpectedly arrived and asked to check Seung-hee's medical records. This made Seung-hee panic, and she tried to grab the disc, but Park Hoon stopped her. Seung-hee looked at Park Hoon, noticing his calm and confident expression, as if he already knew something. Park Hoon inserted the disc into the computer. Just then, the former hospital director, Choi, who had just taken on the role, arrived and demanded that Dr. Moon hand over the disc. As Dr. Moon hesitated, Park Hoon went ahead and opened the medical notes. At that moment, Seung-hee was under immense pressure, but what appeared on the screen was shocking. The results showed to healthy kidneys. Despite what was shown, Park Hoon had already recognized Seung-hee as his girlfriend, Jae-hee. Even though she refused to admit it, Park Hoon believed there was a deeper reason for her denial, something she was hiding. While Dr. Moon chose to apologize to Seung-hee, she didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so she turned around and left. That evening, Park Hoon returned home and realized the disc had been swapped. In fact, he had secretly switched it himself because he wanted to hide the truth from his girlfriend. At that moment, Director Choi visited Park Hoon to share a secret. He revealed that when Park Hoon was young, there had been a medical accident at the hospital. Park Hoon's parents had demanded the surgeon responsible be held accountable, not knowing that the man responsible was Director Choi, standing before him now. At the time, the hospital was thriving, and Director Choi couldn't allow any medical malpractice cases to tarnish its reputation. To stop everything, a senior government official, Yan, devised a solution. Since the North Korean leader needed heart bypass surgery, they offered to send a competent doctor from their side to perform the operation, hoping to avoid war. The higher-ups agreed, and it was decided that if Park Hoon's father was sent to North Korea, he could no longer sue the hospital, and conflict would be averted. Because of his parents' divorce, Park Hoon was forced to follow his father abroad. After the successful surgery, his father was brutally murdered, and Park Hoon was detained in a surgical research institute day and night. Upon learning the truth, Park Hoon was devastated. Director Choi then handed him his father's belongings. Looking at his father's glasses, Park Hoon shed silent tears. After calming down, he met with Director Choi and gave him the medical report. He then asked the patient's family about their situation. It turned out that after the patient's death, his wife had become severely depressed and soon passed away, leaving behind only a young boy. The boy had been adopted in the United States, and since then, no more information was available. Director Choi expressed his intention to go to North Korea to find Park Hoon's girlfriend, but Park Hoon told him to focus on the medical incident instead and find the orphan to apologize. That orphan, it turned out, was having dinner with Abbott, also known as Dr. Han. The director urged the two of them to get married quickly, but Soo-hyun said she wasn't ready and had other things to attend to. In the elevator, Soo-hyun remembered Park Hoon, and it seemed she might have fallen in love with him. Later, Dr. Han reviewed the results and told his parents to be patient and wait a bit longer. That day, a pregnant woman arrived at the hospital, threatening to kill her newborn because her twins had birth defects and she couldn't afford the high medical costs. Despite the doctor's attempts to stop her, she still refused to let go of the knife she was holding. After hearing about the incident, Park Hoon became extremely anxious and rushed to check on the baby. As he looked at the screen, his worrying increased, and he said they needed to operate on the baby immediately. Suddenly, a man stood up to block them. It was the Abbott's son, who declared that this patient owed hundreds of thousands in medical bills and that he intended to have her thrown out of the hospital. Park Hoon was deeply troubled by the situation and couldn't bear to see the patient pushed into a corner. While they were arguing, one of the two children went into cardiac arrest. Park Hoon quickly rushed over and asked Soo-hyun to stop her brother. They were half-siblings, and upon seeing her half-brother, Soo-hyun didn't hesitate. Park Hoon cradled the child and knelt on the hospital bed, immediately starting artificial respiration. He gently pressed the child's chest with his fingers, alternating between chest compressions and breaths, repeating the process over and over. Eventually, he succeeded in reviving the child's heart. In that moment, Park Hoon felt an overwhelming sense of joy, knowing he had saved the child's life through his care. Seeing this fragile life restored, everyone felt a mix of emotions. Gazing at the poor mother and her child, Park Hoon silently resolved to save both of their lives. Just then, he had an idea. The hospital had recently held a meeting where they decided to select two medical teams to perform heart surgery on high-ranking officials. One team was led by Dr. Han, and the other was assigned to Park Hoon. Although some doubted Park Hoon's abilities, Director Oh believed that his skills were outstanding. Upon hearing the news, Park Hoon was filled with rage because the high-ranking official in question was Young Soo-koo, the very person indirectly responsible for his father's death. Furious, Park Hoon went to Dr. Han and, in a symbolic gesture of defeat, removed his medical coat. He had instructed Dr. Han's team to operate on Young Soo-koo, but in that moment, he changed his mind. Park Hoon rushed into the director's office, interrupting the surgical discussion. He looked at Young Soo-koo, then picked up his white coat and said, "I can take part in this surgery competition, but I have one condition. The hospital must cover all the surgical costs. I want to exchange my participation for funds to help the twins with congenital heart defects so the hospital can bear their expenses." Park Hoon stared at the person who had harmed his father, appearing to have his own plan. Then, in a fit of anger, he went to find Young Soo-koo and said, "Do you know that now I really want to win this competition? I want to understand your heart. I'm also curious how you'll react. Pray that I don't operate on you, because if I open your chest and touch your heart, you will die." The man standing before him was responsible for recruiting children in America, acting on a mandate from former Director Choi to find the remaining child after a medical incident 20 years ago. Although he and Park Hoon were close friends, the details of their revenge plot were widely known. Sun Chong didn't reveal Dr. Han's true identity to Director Choi. Meanwhile, Park Hoon became more convinced that Soon-hee was his girlfriend, Jae-hee, since Young Soo-koo had once told Park Hoon, "If you can't heal my heart, then you won't see your beloved girlfriend again." Park Hoon understood that Jae-hee had her own burdens, though he wasn't sure of the true cause. It turned out that Jae-hee had been saved by a man in black after falling into a lake and was forced to join their organization, secretly carrying out missions for Young Soo-koo. Their conversation was interrupted by another arrival, who had been observed by the man in black. He then went to Soon-hee and asked her to join Park Hoon's team to help him gain the opportunity to operate on Young Soo-koo. Dr. Han and Park Hoon split up to hold meetings about the surgery. Members of Dr. Han's team doubted Soo-hyun's abilities, worrying she would affect the surgery's crucial parts. She sought out Park Hoon for guidance, and, instead of answering, he took her hand and began teaching her how to perform the operation. This scene was witnessed by Soon-hee, who had just arrived. Soon-hee felt conflicted, and Dr. Han, who suddenly appeared, was furious. This made Soo-hyun and Park Hoon feel embarrassed, and Dr. Han called Soo-hyun away. Soon he was anxious, reminding Park Hoon that Soo-hyun was their rival's first surgical assistant. Despite this, Park Hoon was only focused on saving the baby and didn't care about winning or losing. Park Hoon was deeply disappointed in Soon-hee, who only cared about winning and losing without considering the surgery's success. Soon-hee, however, had her own reasons, which she couldn't share with Park Hoon. On the other hand, Dr. Han felt humiliated that Soo-hyun had consulted the rival team about the surgery, so he removed her from his team. Soo-hyun was devastated, feeling that all her hard work for the surgery had been in vain.